Welcome back everyone, this is Gundam May Cry, and for this review we're going to be looking at the 1/100 scale Master Grade Geara Doga from the 1988 movie Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack. This kit released in 2013 for 5,280 yen, so I'd say it's somewhere in the mid-range in terms of Master Grade price. Now, to be quite honest, I don't initially remember what it was about this mobile suit that warranted me wanting to get it in Master Grade form specifically. Maybe it was its relation to the Geara Zulu, which reminds me a lot of those soldiers from General Wolf Brigade or the Helghast from Killzone, but sadly that doesn't have a Master Grade yet, so I probably thought the Geara Doga was the next best thing. That said, I think I might actually like this design a little more, but I digress. My impetus for actually going out of my way to buy it was, I just wanted a big ass kit that didn't break the bank. So does this fit the bill? Let's find out. Before we get into it, I just want to take a moment to plug my Ko-Fi page. As you can tell, the channel is still very small, and with my current means, I have to set aside a lot of time to put these videos together. So in the meantime, if you like my content and want to support me just a little more, consider dropping me a small tip on Ko-Fi. Thanks. Now on to the review. Let's first take a look at the box, since I know a lot of us builders are box art enthusiasts as well. This awesome illustration is by Kinoshita Tomotake, who does a lot of art for Gundam and other series like Evangelion, Digimon, Frame Arms, and Final Fantasy. You got old Sazabi back here, and New Gundam over there, duking it out with each other because if you've seen Char's Counterattack, this is kind of one of the big things that happens. Then you got Jeggins and other Geara Dogas just blasting the crap out of each other, such is the fate of most grunt suits. Okay, so stop me if I'm going overboard with this, but if you want to get an idea of how this scales with other Gunpla boxes, in case you need to make a bit of extra shelf space, here it is compared to the average high-grade box. I don't know who I'm helping out with this, but if you're out there, I'm looking out for you. Going to the sides of the box, starting with some photos of the kit, I believe all painted up. And there's something I really appreciate about this just very minimal presentation. I really love that very classic looking text, and I'm not really sure why, it just looks neat. Here's what I think is info on the mobile suit within the context of the movie. Unfortunately, it's all in Japanese, so if you want a translation, you might have to look that up. You get a preview of the Geara Doga's inner frame, look at all of the weapons it comes with, as well as some of the gimmicks and extra features. On the other side, we get an overview of some of the kit's more interesting points of articulation, along with a look at all of the included hand options. And the last thing of note is the kit's compatibility with Bandai's LED units, which are sold separately. The kit is made up of 16 runners, all of them in polystyrene plastic with the exception of 2, which is made out of a rubbery material called TPE. Runner A is multicolored, consisting of a warm gray, a pretty bright red, a clear yellow, and colorless clear. Runners B, C1, and C2 are in a kind of mid-tone green. D1 and D2 are in this really dark, kind of swampy green. Then there's 2 of the same E runner, F1 and F2, G and H, all of them in this cool gray tone. I1 and I2 are in a bright yellow-orange. Lastly, the 2 J runners are made of that rubbery material I mentioned earlier in a very muted yellow. Next you get a set of polycap connectors, which I always mention separate from the runners because it always just kind of feels weird calling them runners. I don't really know why, to be honest. In this packet, we have a sheet of foil stickers, marking decals, and dry transfer decals. And how would we know how to put all of these parts together if it wasn't for our handy magazine-style Master Grade manual with a very nice photograph of the Geara Doga on the back. So given the time this kit came out, everything besides the essential labels are going to be in Japanese. But the actual information you need to know about the build process is going to be communicated entirely through illustrations with the letters and numbers that correspond with each part, so you shouldn't have much trouble following along in spite of that. Now that you have a good idea of what to expect out of this package, it's time to get to the main event. I'll be judging this kit based on my 5 different but somewhat overlapping categories: the build, aesthetics, presentation, accessories and extras, and articulation. At the end, I'll be giving each area a letter score between A through F, so you get a chance to form your own opinion on the kit over the course of the review. Without further delay, let's get right into it. To open this segment, let's take a look at the kit's inner frame. There's a lot of really cool mechanical details, particularly on the legs, but one thing you might be able to notice right away is there's not really much else going on beyond that. So far, this is only the second master grade that I've ever built, my first being the 2.0 Gym that released in 2009. And contrary to its age and appearance, it's a rather complex build with a surprising amount of intricate moving parts. I'm going to be making a few comparisons to this kit, not to tell you which one is better or worse, just to show you how radically different the master grade line can be. Anyways, the Geara Doga size is definitely more for show, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. This kit has a lot of large parts that snap together with little trouble, making it easier for me to recommend to even more entry-level builders. A word of warning, there are a few tight fits in this kit that require a bit more pressure, such as the shoulder joints, and can prove to be a break risk if you're not careful. Now, I will say once everything is nice and flush, it's not as big of a problem as I initially thought it would be, but I'd still recommend stripping down all the delicate parts you could reattach on later just to be on the safe side. Another thing I'd consider is doing a little bit of sanding on this peg that connects the lower legs to the knee armor, as otherwise I couldn't seem to get it to fit at all without stressing the plastic. In general, if any area feels a bit too tight for your comfort, maybe shave the connection down a little. But aside from that, I'd say this kit offers a fairly beginner-friendly and fun building experience, and the weight of the finished product feels really nice in your hands. Onto the out-of-box aesthetics, and I forgot to mention earlier, but I am going to be a bit more critical on master grades than I would the average high grade, and that's because the standards associated with the line are a lot higher. Furthermore, since they also come in at a higher price point, my expectations will likewise reflect that. With that in mind, I think this is for the most part a really good representation of the Geara Doga from the 1988 movie. All of the essential details from the original artwork have been captured here faithfully, while sporting a more practical design language befitting a modern model kit. Bandai absolutely nailed the asymmetrical look of the shoulders that just scream, "I'm a bigger, badder god than the Zaku 2. And I dig how they got the armor to perfectly conform around the shape of the verniers on the front. I think the area that catches my attention the most has to be the head. It's always cool to see robot designs with the sort of baseball helmet-like brim that goes over their face, and the way the light bounces off the clear visor just looks so good. Now that's all fine and dandy, but just how big is this guy, I hear you ask? For size comparisons, here it is next to a high-grade Gundam, a master grade Gym, which I believe is the standard master grade size, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So yeah, not only is he tall, but damn boy, he's thick, boy! I do, however, have a few gripes with the appearance. In terms of surface detail, I find this kit to be somewhat lacking. The armor plates consist of large, simple parts, and with little to break up the predominantly round surfaces, they just look kinda plain. I'm not asking for real grade level part separation, but some creative liberties can go a long way in leaving a stronger impression, especially for an old mobile suit like this. Take the Gym 2.0 for instance, it still maintains that almost bendy appearance from the classic anime, yet at the same time, it's noticeably not the same Gym from the anime. There's a good amount of subtle technical details that help to say something about the mobile suit's performance. Visually interesting elements like this help guide your focus across the entire model, rather than just having it stuck in one place. This isn't a deal breaker, the Geara Doga just plays it a tad too safe for my tastes. Something about the proportions also seems slightly off. Either the arms flare out too much, or the legs don't go out far enough, possibly both. The upper leg section also looks to have been extended somewhat, and hey, I'm all out for the extra height, but it throws off the equilibrium a bit, giving me more Gundam Maxter vibes than Geara Doga, to be honest. And the most controversial aspect about this kit is probably going to be that tubing. I'm a little mixed on it myself. While it does do a decent job emulating the intended effect, it could prove to be an inconvenience to those who like customizing their kits. As far as I know, there's really no good way to paint this material, if at all. There's a very visible mold line you can't sand away, and I doubt you could cut it off without causing some damage. and the fits for them are so specific you're gonna have to do some serious work to mod around them. The absence of alternatives, in my opinion, are pretty unfortunate. I said a lot here, but the point I'm laboriously trying to make is the Geara Doga is a great looking kit. There are some missed opportunities, but what you're looking at here is undoubtedly the Geara Doga. And if anything, it definitely passes the size test. Next we move to the presentation, which relates to the quality of the out-of-box looks. I won't hold the tubing against it much here because the problems with it are more a consequence of their choice to use that material in the first place. You won't be surprised to find that stickers on a master grade kit are going to be pretty minimal. On the decal sheet, you do get a round pink one that you could put over the clear plastic mono eye. That's if you don't want to use the LED gimmick, which I'll show you when we get to the accessories and extras. Then there's foil stickers for the top and bottom backpack sensors, and they're both under the one space on the sticker sheet. The rest are for the weapons. Clear parts would have been nice for these areas, but it's better than nothing. As for other color wraps, I'd say everything you see here is molded in the correct color. I really appreciate the part separation of all the yellow inserts for the verniers and front skirts. Same goes with the thruster bells on the backpack, and if you're really crazy about anime accuracy, you can panel line the insides of all of them black. The only area that should have this yellow but doesn't are the molded details on the feet. But given that you're probably not going to be seeing them that much, you might be better off painting them yourself anyways. A little bit of the gray of the inner frame poking through the muzzle section and knee armor are also welcome touches. As for seam lines, at least for the outer armor, basically every area where two parts come together are either cleverly hidden behind another part or are worked into panel line details, sometimes with a shallow groove separating them. Does it feel like there are some lazy attempts to hide really obvious seams in plain sight? Maybe, but part of the appeal of master grades is the ability to armor strip, so I'm not that irked by it. Now, nub marks are going to be pretty apparent on this kit since it's so big, and I don't think undergating was that common around the time it released. Whatever the case may be, it definitely isn't featured that much, except for maybe one instance I could think of. Still, Bandai does try to mitigate this problem by keeping the gates as small as they can. Your usual offenders are going to be nubs on dark plastic, where the marks are going to be more visible, but even more frustrating are going to be the ones on rounded surfaces, because when you want to use a hobby knife for a simple cleanup, it can be difficult to guide the blade around the form, and there's always that risk of accidentally gouging the plastic or striking a part that's across from the nub you're trying to clean up. This is where I must bring your attention to the cuffs. Dear God, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4 nub marks, and they're all directly on top of just this one surface. I actually had to sand them all down because it looks so jarring and they're all on a very visible part. Like, a lot of the gates on the pieces are usually located somewhere near the bottom, so I don't even know how this happens. This to me seems pretty unacceptable. Still, that is going to be the worst of it. All things considered, if we look at the size to nub mark ratio, I think the size will win over your attention by a long shot. Seeing how well it handles all the other areas, I'd say its presentation gets a pass in my book. We got a preview of all of the accessories and extras, so now let's look at them in more detail. You get 2 pairs of hands for both sides. The first come with sets of swappable fingers and have this thumb that move on a ball joint. The fingers currently equipped are for closed fists and don't serve any purpose beyond that. Swapping out fingers can be a little awkward, but what you want to do is pull them out, and where you see this tab, that's where all of them attach. So just plug them in, and the next pair we're going to look at are the trigger fingers. These are the ones you use to equip the beam rifles. And then the last pair of fingers you get are for a gripping hand, which is used to hold onto the Geara Doga's close-range weapons. The second pair of hands you get are the semi-articulated hands with individually posable digits. The only movement you get for the thumb is from this ball joint. The fingers are also on ball joints, but they bend at 2 points and can come in about this much. I appreciate how all of the fingers are at different heights, making them look more like real hands. Unfortunately, there are no tabs to attach any weapons to, so the utility for these are going to be very limited. If you want, you can certainly use them for things like weapon support, reaching for ammo cartridges, and pissing off Italian people. Now, the process of switching to another pair of hands is actually kind of annoying. Accidentally popping off the swappable fingers is whatever. The polycap, however, refuses to let go of the ball joint, and what's more than likely to happen is taking off the entire wrist section with it. The cuff section is notoriously loose and is practically held on with friction alone. Additionally, having switched out the hands a couple of times, I've already started to notice some damage on the wrist connection, so I'd advise against doing it repeatedly. Once the previous hand is removed, reconnect anything that might have came off with it, and attaching the other hand should be much easier. You won't feel a click, but you'll know when it's in all the way. For weapons, starting with the long range options, you get 2 different beam machine guns. In fact, I think both of them are just called beam machine guns, so we'll roll with that. This is the first one we're going to be looking at, and I think it looks nice. It's got some very beam machine gun-y looking details, but it's all just molded in the one color. Basically every component of this is 2 pieces sandwiched together, so you're going to get some pretty noticeable seams. It's well hidden enough on the stock, and this grenade launcher, I think it's a grenade launcher, is just a single piece. Foil sticker for the front lens, which I think looks okay. The grip can swing left and right. The stock can also be extended for mostly visual effect, but still a neat gimmick. And the ammo cartridge can be, crap! So yeah, you can take out the ammo cartridge. There's a spare too, and I'll show you where that is shortly. Definitely some cool stuff going on with this weapon, though I think it could have benefited from some more interesting part separation. Equipping it is somewhat tricky. You have to slide the grip into the hand and press the grooves against the inside tab. My tip would be supinating the hand first and doing it sideways, because I find it's easier to press down than from the side. After it's secure, turn it to your desired position. I want to add that, although the grip felt strong at first, the machine gun now seems to come loose at the slightest touch. It'll still hold, but attempting two-handed poses again is something I'm not even gonna bother with anymore. Up next, we have another beam machine gun, and I think I might like the look of this one better. While it is smaller, I prefer the sharper, blocky details of this one as opposed to the more rounded look of the previous one. On the other hand, there's a lot less going on here. You get 2 tiny foil stickers for the front. Not amazing, not terrible. The entire weapon body is 2 pieces, so you get a noticeable seam down the middle as well. The only other thing of note about it is, like the last one, you can also remove the ammo cartridge. Moving on to close range weapons, your first option is the beam axe. The whole handle section is just 1 piece, and attached to it is what I must say, one very nice looking beam effect part. On top of that, you get a choice between 2 different axe heads, the other one having a pointy pick-like blade, though not necessarily a pickaxe, and it also looks great. Switching between them is as easy as taking one blade out and replacing it with the other. Equipping it is a similar process to the beam machine guns, this time with the gripping hands. The nice thing about it is there's a slot on the handle that actually plugs into a peg, meaning it's not going to go anywhere once it's in place. Then there's the beam saber, and almost everything I said about the beam axe applies here as well, except the handle is noticeably shorter. The beam effect plugs in on top, and man, that is an incredible looking beam effect. Bandai really went the extra mile making this thing look convincing. One thing that's strange is, there's a slot on the side of the handle that makes it look like it's compatible with the beam axe. However, it's too small for the axe head to fit. Why put it there only to deny the Geara Doga the unstoppable power of sword axe? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Here's how the mobile suit will look holding it. Now, one minor nitpick I have about the hands is, while they're all nicely sculpted, I wish they were a bit more dynamic looking. Cause what comes to mind here isn't so much fierce battle grip, as it is admiring a refreshing popsicle on a hot summer's day. When not in use, you can store it on the back skirt by first removing the blade, then inserting it through the slot like so. You might be wondering, can I do this for the handle for the axe too? And my answer is, sort of. The fit just isn't exact, so if you force it, you'll end up scratching the plastic. Finally, we get to my favorite accessory, and that's the shield. I love this thing. It's just a huge hunk of plastic, so simple, but there's enough details to keep it from looking boring. The part separation on the back is so good. Like, now that I think about it, this was probably the kit's big selling point for me. All of these rockets, or Sturmfausts as they're called, are their own individual pieces. The manual says to have the inside and outside rockets face opposite directions, so I did exactly that. Needless to say, you can remove them, though they alone don't have any function. If anything, they at least give the articulated hands something to play around with. While we're on that, you might have noticed there's a hinge between the shield that separates its two parts, and that actually is functional. You're able to swing this top segment down, and I think what it's supposed to emulate is the rockets actively being fired as shown on the box art. It's definitely a sick feature. This here is the attachment point, and that can rotate around. There's also a hinge that allows you to unfold it for some extra maneuverability. The shield can plug into the back of either arm, simple as that. Getting the Geara Doga to hold it up, however, is another story entirely. Unfortunately, it seems like Bandai didn't account for all this added weight, as there's not enough resistance in the shoulder joint to keep the arm from being dragged down. Consequently, having it on means you're gonna have to contend with the kit's big Achilles heel, its back heaviness. Alright, so while I don't have any out-of-box solutions for the arms, what you can do to remedy the back issues is see if you can cleverly redistribute the weight towards the front. It's not the most desirable option, but it is the least troublesome in my opinion. For extras, first we have a sheet of sticker decals with various marking signs, and just like last time, I didn't use any of them. The other type of decals are a sheet of dry transfers with numbers and Zeonic symbols. One thing I nearly forgot to mention was the base adapter. It's so small I accidentally ended up leaving it on the runner. This I believe is compatible with Action Base 1, since I think that's what the standard Master Grade Action Base is. And here we have a pilot figure of no one in particular. This part technically isn't an extra, it's just the regular Geara Doga headpiece. The one I currently have on has the commander fin, and you could technically switch between them. However, you're provided with only one band piece that wraps around the head, so I think the point is to just pick one style and stick with it. Then for onboard gimmicks, you have an opening cockpit hatch. To access it, you just have to press this part right here and you'll see this little flap open up. There's your look at the seated pilot figure inside. The side skirts can open up too, and that's where you keep the additional ammo I mentioned before. Now to look at that LED gimmick. It can be a little tricky to access because it's all blocked off by this armor, so what you want to do is bring this front portion off first. Once you've done that, you can pull the entire head section out with no trouble at all. Right underneath it, you can find the slot where you insert the LED, which again is sold separately. Currently I have on a Bandai LED. Flip the switch, and as you can see, the one I'm using is bright pink, and it really shines through that clear mono eye. Lastly, you can take the headpiece off and turn the mono eye. However, the knob seems to be really tight and I can't get it to turn on camera. I don't want to break anything here, but I'm certain it works fine. I'm probably just doing it wrong. All in all, while some of the stuff here is pretty basic, and in some instances requires a bit of patience, this kit packs in more than enough content to really make you feel like you've gotten your money's worth. At last, it's time to take a look at the articulation, starting from the head, and I'm gonna be frank, you're not really gonna get much. The head sits on a small peg with a ball joint going down into the neck. The neck joint allows it to move up and down slightly. It's so low down that you're given very little clearance for that massive dome. Likewise, because of all this stuff going on with the collar section, the head can barely nod left and right, let alone achieve any kind of rotation. Moving down to the chest, aside from the cockpit, it's basically a brick. There's no ab crunch mechanism, the whole bottom half is just a single piece. Here's the thing that bugs me. Looking at the inner frame, there's a hinge joint at the abdominal section that suggests this kit might have had an ab crunch in mind. But somewhere along the line, they designed the cockpit hatch in a way that completely negates it. Sacrificing that little bit of mechanical complexity feels like such a wasted opportunity to me. Then for the torso connection, it can kind of flop back and forth and side to side. However, when you consider the hollowness of the abdominal region and the weight of the backpack, its default state is pretty much going to be leaning back. The culprit is going to be this really basic ball joint connection with nothing to counterbalance the weight. The Gym 2.0 might be lacking somewhat in rotation, but what it at least has is stability. The way the torso plugs into the waist so it doesn't go anywhere, while still maintaining some admirable forwards and backwards movement. In my opinion, the connection probably would have been better off as a straight peg, because the movement here feels like it hinders more than it does help. On the bright side, for rotation you do get the full 360, even though the backpack runs into a few things. And if you're curious, the backpack doesn't do anything, but I guess these thruster bells can move back and forth. I'm just gonna blast through the arm articulation here. In the torso, there's a pop-out mechanism that lets you bring the arms forward somewhat. A nice feature, though nothing too crazy. Left shoulder armor's on a ball joint, giving you as much movement as you could possibly want. There's also a cool craning mechanism that lets you move the entire piece up and down to your desired position. Thanks to that, the lateral raise for the left arm is going to be a little more than 90 degrees. The front thrusters can move left and right, and the side thrusters can move up and down. The right shoulder armor is also on a ball joint, but it's not extended out like on the left side, and because of the big shield attached to it, it's going to clash a bit with other parts. The shield itself is on a ball joint too, and you can get some pretty decent swivels out of it. Not quite 90 on the lateral raise because it's blocked by the shoulder armor. You could maybe get more by pulling it out a bit, but as is, that's the best you're gonna get. The arms are on ball joints, so you could go all the way around. There's a teeny bit of movement in other directions too, though the polycap connection is pretty tight, so you might not make use of it. There's your bicep swivel. Man, that cuff section is gonna drive me nuts. Pay no mind to that. Double jointed bend at the arm. I suppose that's passable. The hands are on a ball joint connected to another ball joint via polycap, so you get some neat movement in the wrist section too. You can get some flexion along with the typical rotation. Making our way down, the front skirts are on ball joints and you can lift them up about that much. There's that cool inner frame detail underneath. Little bit of wiggle movement as well. The side skirts just clip onto the waist section, so a bit of up and down over here. Fairly minimal back and forth movement on the back skirt. Now this entire waist section is really bare bones. All you get is this tiny peg that plugs into a polycap, and with how much weight is going towards the bottom, it baffles me as to why they decided to go about it this way. Safe to say, I think y'all know what to expect here. The legs go up this far, and hey, that's not too bad, but you see what I mean? That poor little peg is doing all the work, but try as it might, he boot just too damn big. Gravity isn't doing wonders for the lateral movement either. Though if you want to see the splits in spite of that, I can't imagine wanting much more than this. As for movement out to the back, that's going to be about it. Weight issues aside, the range certainly is good. The question is, was it worth sacrificing the stability for it? The thigh can swivel all the... My bad. Okay, so because the legs are pretty wide, you might end up bumping into the waist section if you go all the way around, causing the leg to pop off its connection point. It's not a huge deal, you could still get full rotation if you bring the leg out at an angle, though I personally don't see myself needing this much swivel. Double jointed knee, giving us a little more than 90 degrees on the leg bend, while also showing off a pretty awesome armor sliding effect. I will say, however, this gimmick only seems to work about half the time for me, whereas the other half, the inner frame just kinda pops out along with the knee armor, because there's nothing stopping it from coming out. You could easily push it back in place, I just wish it was designed a little better is all. Lastly, the feet, and I forgot to mention how much I love how big and blocky these feet are. While they do basically anchor the leg movement, because of them I don't think I've had the kit topple over even once. That said, they are on ball joints. There's a joint inside that lets you swing the foot back and forth. This flap up front also moves a little up and down, though I feel like it kind of limits the foot's forward movement. The swinging joint is actually connected to a moving piston that goes up and down every time you move the joint back and forth, and I think that's a really neat feature. The only thing is, due to the ball joint and the size of the foot being much larger, it can be hard to tell if you're even accessing that much movement. Okay, the foot keeps popping off, so I might as well just show you the foot bend. It only bends at one point, but it's still fun to play around with. And to round things off, the ankle pivot is not great. This is as far as the legs will go out while the feet stay flat on the ground. Overall, I think the most generous way for me to describe this kit's articulation is that it's just okay. What's there is decent, but it's nothing revolutionary. In fact, a few design choices work to its detriment. At the very least, if you're patient, you could still achieve some good standing poses. Alright folks, I know it's been a long one, so it's time to wrap things up with my final scores for each category. I'm going to give the build a B. Yeah, the build is pretty good. There are some ways it could be a little better. Some ideas aren't as successful as I'd hoped they'd be. There are a few tight fits, and it's kind of lacking a bit in terms of complexity. On the other hand, it's a fast and fun build and a master grade kit that I think even less experienced builders could have a good time with. I'm going to give the aesthetics a B. It's a great looking, film accurate representation of the Geara Doga. It's not going to be as visually striking as say Sazabi Varka, and I wish the proportions were a little better. But if you just want a grunt suit with some real shelf presence, then I think the master grade Geara Doga does an excellent job handling that. The presentation... what the heck, I'm giving the presentation an A. Some of the nubs on this kit are pretty egregious. Still, at the end of the day, there are far worse things than a few bad nubs. Everything else is good, and there's so much going on with the size that the little faults might not bother you that much. Accessories and extras gets an A. Some stuff could look better, some stuff could work better, but I doubt anyone could look at everything included in the box and feel disappointed by it. Also, that shield is just super sick. Articulation gets a C. So it definitely drops the ball a bit here. Don't get me wrong, it's not the worst articulation ever, otherwise I'd have scored it a lot lower. It just seems like Bandai couldn't find a compromise between size and stability, and the functionality suffers as a result of that. In conclusion, I really like the Master Grade Geara Doga. It may seem like I was a bit harsh or nitpicky in some places, but if I were to rate this on just a pure value factor alone, it'd get an A easy. It's not a kit you have to run out and buy as soon as possible. It doesn't have a lot of fancy bells and whistles. That said, if you really like this mobile suit or just enjoy building master grades in general, then yeah, it's a solid enough recommendation for me. If you can get a hold of it, I'd say go for it. But folks, that's going to be it for this review. I hope y'all enjoyed it or found it informative. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check back in for more Gundam May Cry content. Take care. Friends, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button, that helped me out a lot, and comment any thoughts you might have down below. I'm gonna keep this short because once this video drops, I'm gonna need to immediately start working on the next one. It's one that I'd like to get out by the end of the month because I have something special in store, so I hope y'all look forward to it. As for this review, I definitely wanted to experiment around a bit and try out some stuff that I haven't done in my previous videos, so any kind of feedback would be appreciated. That's really all I have to say for right now. Remember to hit the subscribe button if you want to stay on top of all of my uploads. And for all of my other content, you can visit my Twitter via the link below. Okay everybody, once again, thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Gundam May Cry, signing out.